Namor the Sub-Mariner in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka Namor McKenzie in the comics, is the King of Atlantis, or Talokan, and is Marvel's first mutant. One of the most powerful and cunning characters in all of Marvel lore, Namor has fought against a plethora of both heroes and villains throughout his illustrious history. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few, shall we? Blind lawyer by day and heroic vigilante by night, Matt Murdock is known as the Daredevil, protector of Hell's Kitchen. Possessing radioactively enhanced physiology and a superhuman sensory system garnered after an accident as a kid, Daredevil is also well versed in a multitude of martial arts, primarily using his boxing style in honor of his father. Last seen inside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as She-Hulk's new boyfriend, Daredevil has not only had his fair share of unfair fights, but he has even crossed paths with the likes of Spider-Man. Although he has not encountered any Wakandans or Talokans yet, the possibility definitely exists as we see the MCU's Earth and multiverse expand. Normally considered a street-level superhero, Daredevil often finds himself out-muscled when combating vastly mutated and cosmic foes. With Namor being not only a mutant, but considered a god to his people, the Sub-Mariner would undoubtedly have no problem thwarting the man without fear. On the page, during Daredevil number 7, we saw just that. When Namor walked into Murdock's law office, he literally attempted to sue the world, and the two inevitably fought. Namor beat Daredevil up badly and tossed him into the ocean, only to save his life, noting Murdock's exceptional valor. Luke Cage, often referred to as Power Man, is the nigh-indestructible Harlem Street Master who garnered his impenetrable skin and incredible strength via experimentation during his time spent in Seagate Prison. A hero for hire and sometimes member of the Avengers in the comic books, Luke Cage has not officially been seen inside of the MCU under the Marvel Studios banner yet. However, with both Daredevil and the Kingpin appearing recently in the She-Hulk and Hawkeye series respectively, I'm sure it won't be too long before we see the rest of the Netflix crew in the MCU. Having duked it out on a couple of occasions in the comics already, Namor vs. Luke Cage appears to be quite the mismatch, and I'm sure in the MCU it would be no different. In their very first encounter, Namor one-punched Power Man for confronting him with ease, knocking Cage out cold. During the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, the metahuman Cage would put up a much better fight against the mutant Namor, underwater no less. However, it would be the Sub-Mariner who would rise to the top, coming out victorious with the aquatic advantage. Physically enhanced by the super soldier serum, Steve Rogers was the original Captain America, who eventually passed the mantle onto the Falcon, Sam Wilson. In both the MCU and the comics, Steve Rogers has led the Avengers in successfully defending the Earth and the universe on innumerable occasions. In addition, Sam Wilson has been on his left, making and using the moniker of the Falcon before donning Rogers' vibranium shield and being dubbed Captain America himself. The last time we saw Rogers and Wilson in the MCU, the former was an old man and in no shape to be defending the world anymore, while the latter was aiding the Winter Soldier in stopping the Flag Smashers. Although it is highly likely that Namor and Wilson cross trajectories in phases 5 and 6, the affair might not be a healthy one for the new Cap. Both Rogers and Wilson would taste defeat at the hands of Namor, considering his power level is godlike in the MCU. If the Sub-Mariner were to isolate Steve Rogers on land or in the sea, he would surely make quick work of the Avenger. On top of that, I'll take Namor's staff and natural mutant flying abilities over the former Falcon's mechanical flight suit and newly acquired shield any day. Ali Frazier, The Rock John Cena, Batman the Joker. These are rivalries that will stand the test of time, and Namor is no stranger to legendary blood feuds himself. Although recently the heat between the two has cooled off due to their agreement to stop fighting with one another, Namor and the original Human Torch, Jim Hammond, have had back and forth wins and losses against each other in the comics over the last 80 years. Not to be confused with the member of the Fantastic Four, Johnny Storm, who also uses the moniker of Human Torch. The original Human Torch, Jim Hammond, is an android composed of synthetic materials created to mimic all virtual functions of a human being. And he can also controllably combust, fly, and throw fireballs at people, because, comics. Namor and the Torch are not only Marvel's two oldest superheroes, but they have also thrown down and teamed up countless numbers of times, with both men figuring out how to best the other. Although we have not seen the sentient cyborg inside of the MCU yet, we have seen nods to the Torch, as well as his inventor, Phineas T. Horton, at the 1943 Stark Expo during Captain America: The First Avenger. The inorganic, amorphous extraterrestrial species known as symbiotes are alien life forms that find, corrupt, and empower their hosts. The most famous of these symbiotes being Venom, who in the comics originally attached itself to Spider-Man before becoming synonymous with the likes of Eddie Brock and Flash Thompson. In the MCU and the Sony Spider-Verse, Venom has been primarily featured as a superhero as opposed to a villain, and is bonded with the aforementioned Eddie Brock, who we last saw being transported across the multiverse, leaving a piece of the symbiote behind on the main MCU Earth. Another popular host of the Venom symbiote in the comics is a criminal known as Scorpion, Matt Gargan, who was spotted in the MCU during Spider-Man Homecoming, but hasn't been seen since. Looking back at the books, Gargan Venom once threw down with Namor, resulting in the Sub-Mariner utterly decimating the former Scorpion, viciously ripping Venom's tongue out. Although at this point in the MCU, I find it very unlikely that Namor and any symbiote will cross paths, at least not until Avengers Secret Wars. However, this could perhaps be an indication of who the symbiote chooses to infect first. Who do you want to see as the MCU's primary Venom? Billionaire tech mogul, super genius, and wearer of the Iron Man suit Tony Stark has not only inspired the likes of Peter Parker and the next entry on our list, but he was also the catalyst in assembling the Avengers and ultimately defeating Thanos in the MCU, sacrificing himself in the process. Due to this sacrifice, it seems impossible that we could ever see Iron Man and Namor throw down in a live-action film. However, Avengers Secret Wars does leave the door open for these two characters to cross paths in some capacity, because, you know, multiversal shenanigans. In the comics, Namor and Iron Man have fought each other and have teamed up a copious amount of times, rivaling the feud of the Sub-Mariner and the Human Torch. Furthermore, both characters are OG members of the Illuminati, however, neither of which appeared as members of the group on Earth 838 during Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. In one of their more notable comic book confrontations, an incensed Namor was able to drag Iron Man deep into the ocean, removing his mask and nearly drowning Stark in the assault. Doctor Strange did step in to save Tony Stark, however, a battle in both the water or skies seems to favor the Sub-Mariner. Warning! Black Panther Wakanda Forever spoilers ahead, but you've already seen it, right? I'm sure you probably have. During Black Panther 2, we were introduced to a young genius called Riri Williams, who, unbeknownst to her, had actually aided the nation of the world by helping invent the means of locating vibranium deep in the ocean near Talokan. Because of this, Namor and his people sought out to hunt down and kill Riri, while Shuri and the Wakandans attempted to protect her. In an effort to defeat Namor, Shuri and Riri would discover Kukulkan's weakness and designed a ship along with a battle suit in order to exploit it, by vaporizing the moisture off of the Sub-Mariner's skin. This vibranium-enhanced suit would mark the second version of the Ironheart armor seen in the movie, and Riri Williams would use it to help defeat Namor and his people. Although the two have come close to combat already, it was in a team versus team war-style setting. If it were a one-on-one affair, I'm not sure how well Ironheart would fare in the tussle. Similar to the previous entry on our list, there are more Black Panther Wakanda Forever spoilers in this entry. During the aforementioned sequel film, Shuri finds herself grieving and struggling to move forward without her late brother T'Challa, who tragically fell ill with a mysterious sickness and perished. Feeling as though they were being provoked by the United Nations, Namor and the Talokanians would rise to the shores of Wakanda in an attempt to recruit their Queen Ramonda and her army. Namor felt as though the rest of the surface world would eventually turn their backs and come for both Talokan and Wakanda. Therefore, they should probably join forces. This, of course, led to an inevitable battle between the two nations, and Shuri would ultimately become the Black Panther, before throwing down toe-to-toe with the Sub-Mariner. Although Shuri does best Namor in the climax of the film, she also relied on the help of other scientists, microwave booby traps, and desert terrain. Not to take anything away from Shuri or her brilliance and tactical fortitude, but with Namor more than likely learning from his loss, if he were to isolate Shuri somewhere in the water or air, there's a good chance he could best the new Black Panther in a rematch. Jen Walters is an attorney at law and the cousin of Bruce Banner, who also became infected with gamma-radiated blood, rendering her the sensational She-Hulk. Possessing brain, brawn, and beauty, She-Hulk is more than just an imposing threat physically, as her tactical and combat skills are exceptional above most. As seen in the MCU She-Hulk series, however, Jen Walters is less interested in exploring her powers and becoming an Avengers-style superhero, and is more focused on her lawyer work and finding a compatible mate. One thing both the comic book and MCU versions of She-Hulk share in common is that Jen can get, well, kinda thirsty at times. And Namor is a tall, dark drink of water that She-Hulk has had her eyes on before. Although Namor and She-Hulk are very fond of one another and have teamed up way more times than they have fought in the comics, the Sub-Mariner has beaten Jen in chaotic scraps in a couple of instances. If the two were to throw down in the movies or on Disney+, I personally feel as though Namor's ruthlessness and battle-tested seasoning would allow him to get the victory over She-Hulk. What they do afterwards, though, probably wouldn't appear on screen. Speaking of Hulks, the gamma-radiated Dr. Bruce Banner accidentally transformed himself into the Incredible Hulk during an experiment gone wrong. Capable of tapping into unbridled power and strength when emotionally enraged, the Hulk has been presented in the MCU as an even-keeled and intelligent monster, as Banner has taken control of his anger within. In the comics, Namor and the Hulk have come face-to-face in a myriad of circumstances. Starting out as rivals, the two would duke it out quite often. However, upon discovering the nature of the Green Goliath, Namor garnered an affinity for and grew fond of the Hulk, resulting in them partnering up as well. When fighting amongst each other, Namor has bested his frenemy in almost every duel, though the Hulk has gotten the upper hand a time or two. Battling on land, underwater, or even in space, the Sub-Mariner's strength, speed, and intelligence proved too much for Banner, and as a duo, the two are nearly unstoppable. Initially, I would give the nod to the Hulk in a one-on-one contest based off of the fact that the madder he gets, the stronger he gets, with a seemingly bottomless gas tank. However, the power-dampened Smart Hulk we've gotten to know recently in the MCU would definitely get beaten by the Sub-Mariner. It's finally happening. Deadpool is officially part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. To make things even better, he's bringing Wolverine with him. Having finally been introduced to mutants inside the MCU and across the multiverse in Professor X, Ms. Marvel, and now Namor, and with Deadpool 3 happening under the Marvel Studios banner, I think it's safe to assume the possibility of mutants confronting other mutants is definitely in the books for phases 5 and 6. Deadpool here is a master marksman and combatant who possesses a regenerative healing factor, and he's uniquely capable of breaking the fourth wall, an ability that renders the Merc at the Mouth limitless in power when you really think about it. Sure, She-Hulk can do it, but not to the degree that he can. I mean, he's been able to jump across universes, create flashbacks, rewrite history, and merge cinematic universes in his movies already. He's even had his own version of what happened during Secret Wars in the comics, where he defeated Kang the Conqueror, changing the perception of those events forever. When it comes down to a tussle between Namor and Deadpool, the two have never really met in the comics. However, I feel as though it would result in Namor having to comedically kill Wade Wilson over and over and over again. James Howlett, aka Logan, or more famously the Wolverine, is a deadly mutant and member of the X-Men with an uncanny regenerative healing factor, not to mention enhanced senses and physiology. Oh, and did I mention his adamantium lace skeleton and claws? Although vibranium is the talk of the town currently in the MCU, adamantium is technically the most unassailable and hard-wearing metal alloy known in the Marvel Universe. However, that does not mean that Namor would automatically lose to Wolverine in a fight. Logan possesses very few weaknesses, but one that the winged serpent god could easily exploit is the X-Men's susceptibility to drowning. You can't regenerate when you can't breathe, and Logan's metal skeleton heavily weighs him down. In the comics, Namor and Wolverine have traded blows a fair amount of times, with both men acknowledging how exceptionally strong their fellow mutant brother is. And it could be argued that Logan has bested the Sub-Mariner more often than not, with Wolverine finally crossing over into the MCU canonically, and with Avengers Secret Wars on the way, I can almost guarantee that we will see the Sub-Mariner and Weapon X cross paths, or words, in some capacity very soon. Where there are X-Men, there will inevitably be the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and with the Brotherhood comes the mystical master of magnetism and malicious metal manipulator himself, Magneto. Alliterations are cool. Magneto, or Eric Lehnsherr, is one of the most powerful mutants in all of Marvel, and remains one of the most iconic supervillains in comic book history. However, as seen over recent years in the comics as well as the X-Men movies, which are slowly becoming canonical to the MCU multiverse as a whole, Magneto has chosen a path of good over evil. On top of that, Lehnsherr has not only become a fully fledged member of the X-Men, but even acts as the team's leader when Professor X is busy or otherwise incapacitated. Another powerful leader and mutant who has at one point joined the X-Men in the comics is Namor, who Magneto tends to reason with more than anything due to their shared disdain for humankind. Magneto has resorted to trickery and machinery in order to help him fend off Namor, recognizing the Submariner's power as potentially greater than his own. Thor Odinson, the Asgardian god of thunder as we all know, is one of the most powerful Avengers in both the comics and MCU. Another character who often allies with the Submariner, Thor and Namor have also fought each other many times as well. In the comics, Thor has bested Namor virtually every time. However, these were not battles fought with ease. Looking at the MCU, and director of Black Panther Wakanda Forever Ryan Coogler has stated that Namor is equally as powerful as Thor. Most recently, we have seen Thor showing off a softer and goofier side, becoming the adoptive father of Gore the God Butcher's daughter Love, actually gifting her Mjolnir as he teaches her how to be heroic in battle. Some might even say Thor is past his prime, and gearing up to potentially pack in his warrior ways for good. In contrast, Namor is not only visceral and brutal, but he is also passionately in his peak. And even though Thor's battle axe Stormbreaker is a powerful game changer, personally, I'd put my money on the feathered serpent god. Reed Richards is Mr. Fantastic. His wife Susan Storm is the Invisible Woman. Her brother Johnny Storm is the Human Torch. Their friend Ben Grimm is the Thing. Together, this quartet, often referred to as Marvel's first family, comprises the superhero team called the Fantastic Four, who have probably more history and encounters with Namor than anybody else in Marvel history. The majority of the conflict that occurs between the Submariner and the Fantastic Four is Namor's obsessive infatuation with Sue Storm. Not only has Namor abducted and professed his passion for Susan more times than one could count, but the two have actually fallen in love. Or at least according to Namor, it was love. This, of course, enrages Mr. Fantastic, as Namor's advancements towards his bride are not only unwelcome, but are often used to manipulate Richard's emotions. More often than not, Namor is able to defeat all four Fantastic Four members on his own, and when these characters all inevitably cross paths in Phase 6 of the MCU, they'd be foolish not to explore this dynamic. And that's our list. Do you agree Namor could defeat these heroes inside of the MCU? Who else has Namor defeated in the comics? Let us know in the comments down below, and be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons and enable notifications so you don't miss any more Kukulkan comic content.